On October 28, 2025, Jamaica was struck by a force almost unimaginable. Hurricane Melissa, packing 185 miles per hour winds and a 4-meter storm surge, rewriting the island's history in a matter of hours. But Melissa's violent arrival is just the latest chapter in a story that began as a nameless swirl over abnormally warm Caribbean waters, fueled by heat and low wind shear like the world has rarely seen. Scientists say storms like this are up to 900 times more likely now. A terrifying glimpse at our planet's future. So, where did Hurricane Melissa come from? What fueled its explosive power? And with so much destruction already, what's still at risk? This is Hurricane Melissa, 2025. Everything we know so far. And the answers begin at the storm's origin. At 6 a.m. UTC on October 24th, 2025, meteorologists at the National Hurricane Center issued their first advisory for a new tropical depression in the eastern Caribbean Sea. The coordinates, 13.7 degrees north, 62.5 degrees west, placed it just south of the Lesser Antilles, drifting west-northwest over waters warmer than any October on record in this part of the basin. Satellite imagery confirmed a growing cluster of thunderstorms, their tops colder and taller with each new scan. Ship and buoy reports from the area echoed the same message. The pressure was dropping, winds were beginning to organize, and the sea's surface, already running nearly 1.5 degrees Celsius above normal, was feeding energy into the system hour by hour. Forecasters logged the moment in their internal records. Tropical depression. 14, as it was first known, had officially formed. The designation meant more than just a name. It triggered a chain of alerts, model runs, and regional coordination. Meteorologists in Kingston, Miami, and Port of Spain began analyzing the depression's structure, noting the broad, slow-turning circulation and the unusually deep pool of warm water beneath it. Early model guidance suggested a slow west-northwest drift, but uncertainty remained high. The depression's environment was striking. Low wind shear, abundant moisture, and an ocean heat content rarely seen this late in the season. At the Jamaican Meteorological Service, Dr. Latoya Sinclair and her team watched the first advisory with a sense of unease. The depression's position and the raw fuel beneath it stood out. In her log, Sinclair wrote, "Conditions are primed. If this organizes, we could be looking at something historic." By midday, the depression's center was clearly defined on satellite loops, and the forecast discussion flagged the potential for rapid development. No watches or warnings were issued yet, but the stage was set. The storm's path, its future strength, and the fate of the islands in its reach all hung in the balance. For now, the world had a timestamp and a set of coordinates. The clock on Hurricane Melissa had started. Beneath the churning cloud tops of Tropical Depression 14, the Caribbean Sea was running a dangerous fever. Satellite-derived sea surface temperatures hovered between 29.3 and 29.7 degrees Celsius, an anomaly of 1.2 to 1.4 degrees above the seasonal norm, confirmed by NOAA's OISST analysis. This wasn't just a warm patch, it was a vast, deep pool of heat, with the 29-degree isotherm plunging 65 to 75 meters below the surface along the storm's projected path. For a developing cyclone, that meant an almost unlimited supply of energy. Even as the system's winds began to stir the ocean, mixing cooler water upward, the heat reservoir held steady. There was little to slow the transfer of energy from sea to sky. The atmospheric setup proved just as permissive. Wind shear, the invisible force that can tear apart even the most promising storms, measured less than 10 knots through the lower and middle levels. SHIPS diagnostics flagged the rare alignment. Weak upper-level winds, a stable anticyclonic outflow pattern aloft, and deep tropical moisture feeding into the circulation from the east. With no strong currents to disrupt its core, the system's thunderstorms could tower higher, their latent heat release reinforcing the storm's spin. Ocean heat content, tracked by both satellite and Hurricane Hunter dropsondes, registered above 100 kilojoules per square centimeter, well past the threshold associated with major hurricane formation in peer-reviewed studies. Meteorologists recognize the signs: a deep, undisturbed warm layer, minimal disruptive shear, and a slow-moving center able to draw from the ocean's energy without interruption. The SHI-PS Rapid Intensification Index began to climb, quietly alerting forecasters that the odds of a dramatic leap in strength were rising by the hour. No single ingredient was unusual on its own, but together they created a rare and volatile combination. The Caribbean, in late October, was primed for a storm to do something extraordinary. As the depression's structure sharpened and its winds began to climb, the stage was set for an explosive transformation, one that would soon put every forecast model and every coastal community in its path to the test. Melissa's transformation from a loosely organized tropical depression to a hurricane on the edge of history began not just with warm water, but with the mechanics of ocean and atmosphere locked in rare alignment. In the hours after its birth, the storm drifted above a Caribbean heat reservoir almost without parallel for late October. Satellite and aircraft data confirmed a 29 degrees Celsius layer plunging deeper than 65 meters, an oceanic fuel tank that simply would not run dry, even as Melissa's winds began to churn the surface. Every sweep of the Hurricane Hunter dropsondes captured the same message. The heat extended far below the reach of upwelling, denying the usual cooling that slows most storms. As the core tightened, the atmosphere above offered no resistance. Wind shear, often the silent killer of young hurricanes, remained below 10 knots, allowing towering thunderstorms to stack vertically, undisturbed. The upper-level outflow, traced by cirrus streaming away from the center, formed a textbook anticyclonic pattern. Moisture, drawn in from the deep tropics, wrapped fully around the circulation. Nothing in the environment hindered the storm's growth. By the time Melissa's eye first appeared on microwave imagery, analysts at the National Hurricane Center flagged the system for rapid intensification. The eye, only 11 nautical miles across at its tightest, became a window into the storm's engine. Aircraft recon reported pressure plummeting with each pass: 997 millibars, then 985, then lower still. The winds responded in kind, leaping in 12-hour bursts: 75 miles per hour, 115 miles per hour, 140 miles per hour. Each new advisory forced modelers to recalibrate, as the storm outpaced even the most aggressive forecasts. Dr. Kevin Tran, a hurricane analyst at NOAA, summed up the situation in a late-night briefing. "We're watching ocean heat content values above 100 kilojoules per square centimeter, and a 29-degree isotherm deeper than 70 meters. That's a setup you see maybe once a decade, if that. Melissa is drawing on an energy reserve that just doesn't quit." The coupling of sea and sky, so often fragile, held firm for Melissa. With every passing hour, the storm's core grew more symmetric, its eye wall more defined. The physics were relentless: heat rising from the ocean, moisture condensing into thunderheads, pressure dropping, winds accelerating. No single factor explained the speed of the transformation. It was the rare combination: deep warmth, calm shear, saturated air, that let the storm leap from obscurity to the brink of record books. In the end, the numbers told the story best. A warm layer over 60 meters deep, an 11 nautical mile eye, and a pressure drop that left forecasters grasping for precedent. Melissa's mechanics were not just textbook, they were exceptional. A demonstration of what happens when every ingredient for rapid intensification falls perfectly into place. At the heart of Hurricane Melissa's story lies a set of numbers that stunned even the most seasoned forecasters. On the evening of October 26th, the National Hurricane Center's internal logs captured a rare sense of disbelief. The storm's central pressure had plunged to 892 millibars, a figure reserved for only the most extreme hurricanes in Atlantic history. In the post-satellite era, fewer than a handful of storms have breached the 900 millibar barrier. Melissa's pressure drop, measured by Hurricane Hunter aircraft and confirmed by surface buoys, placed it among the top 10 most intense Atlantic hurricanes ever recorded. Sustained winds climbed to 185 miles per hour, matching the highest readings on the NHC's scale for the season. The storm's intensification was not just rapid, it was historic. Over a single 24-hour span, Melissa's winds jumped by 70 miles per hour, a leap that left many forecast models scrambling to catch up. Advisory packages issued that night included a rare caveat: observed intensification has exceeded all guidance. Inside the NHC, forecasters compared Melissa's metrics to benchmarks like Hurricane Dorian and Hurricane Wilma. The pressure of 892 millibars was lower than Katrina at landfall and within range of the legendary Labor Day hurricane of 1935. But what set Melissa apart was not just its raw strength, it was the speed at which it reached those heights. Model ensembles, even the most aggressive, had lagged behind reality by a full intensity category. One internal message, later released for scientific review, read, "Melissa's pressure falls are outpacing our highest rapid intensification indices. This is a case study for the record books." The rarity of such a storm in late October added to the shock. Since the advent of routine satellite monitoring, only a few hurricanes have reached Category 5 after October 15th. The combination of ultra-deep warm water, minimal wind shear, and a slow-moving core created a scenario that most hurricane specialists encounter only once in a career. As the NHC's lead forecaster wrote in a post-analysis note, "Very few storms have ever had this much oceanic fuel, this late in the season, aligned so perfectly with upper-level conditions." Melissa's place in the 2025 season was clear. It was not just another major hurricane, it was the outlier. The storm that forced the scientific community to revisit assumptions about what is possible in the modern Atlantic. Every metric, pressure, wind speed, rate of intensification, demanded a recalibration of the scale. For the communities in its path, the numbers were more than statistics. They were the warning that something extraordinary and deeply dangerous was unfolding offshore. From its birth in the Eastern Caribbean, Melissa's path traced a slow, deliberate arc across some of the warmest waters ever recorded in late October. After forming near 13.7 degrees north and 62.5 degrees west, the storm advanced west-northwest at less than 6 knots, barely outpacing the trade winds. Each new advisory from the National Hurricane Center placed its center just a handful of nautical miles farther along the same axis. First southeast of St. Lucia, then south of Puerto Rico, then into the open Caribbean basin. The slow drift allowed the storm's core to linger over that deep pool of 29 degrees Celsius water, drawing energy hour after hour. Meteorologists tracked Melissa's coordinates with mounting concern. By October 25th, the official best track data showed the storm's center at 15.2 degrees north, 68.4 degrees west. Still moving sluggishly, its forward speed never exceeding 6 knots. This lethargic pace meant the storm's eyewall had time to organize, and its rain bands swept repeatedly over the same areas. Cloud tops grew colder and more symmetric, a telltale sign of strengthening, while the circulation expanded outward, covering hundreds of miles of open sea. The geography of the Central Caribbean shaped every stage of Melissa's journey. To the north, the highlands of Hispaniola and eastern Cuba loomed as potential disruptors, but the storm's path stayed just far enough south to avoid any serious interference. To the west, the shallow banks off Jamaica and the Cayman Trench provided a corridor of unbroken warmth. As Melissa inched closer to Jamaica, its forward motion slowed even further, hovering near 5 knots. This crawl extended the exposure for every island in its reach, ensuring that no region could count on a quick escape from its influence. By the morning of October 27th, the storm's position, now just offshore of Jamaica's southern coast, placed the entire island in its direct path. The slow movement meant prolonged wind, unrelenting rain, and a growing sense of unease for communities from Kingston to Negril. The official track, plotted point by point, told the story of a hurricane in no hurry, determined to wring every last drop of energy from the Caribbean before making its fateful landfall. At exactly 1400 hours UTC on October 27th, the eye wall of Hurricane Melissa made landfall at New Hope, a small community along Jamaica's southwestern coast. Radar scans from Kingston confirmed the moment: a perfect ring of extreme winds, dense rain, and pressure at its lowest point. 892 millibars crossed the shoreline in a matter of minutes. In the advisory logs, the event was time-stamped and underlined: a rare direct hit by a Category 5 hurricane. The outer bands had battered the area for hours, but the arrival of the inner core was something different. Local wind sensors, before they failed, registered sustained gusts above 180 miles per hour. Doors and windows that had held through the morning began to shudder and break. Residents who stayed in New Hope described the sound as a freight train, relentless, deafening, with no end in sight. For nearly an hour, the community endured the full force of the eye wall. The sky turned a strange, shifting gray as the eye passed overhead, offering a brief, eerie calm before the backside of the storm slammed into homes and shelters. Emergency channels went silent as communications towers toppled. The storm surge, driven by the hurricane's onshore winds, rose rapidly. Water pushed inland, swallowing streets and flooding ground floors. Those who had taken shelter in concrete schools or churches found themselves cut off, surrounded by rising water and flying debris. The only link to the outside world was the distant, fading voice of the Jamaican Meteorological Service, relaying the last radar images before the system went down. For New Hope, the landfall was not just a point on a map, it was a dividing line. Before 1400 hours UTC, the community was braced, anxious, holding on. After, it was changed. The full scale of what Melissa had brought would only become clear in the hours and days ahead. But the raw power unleashed at landfall set the stage for everything that followed. In the aftermath of Melissa's landfall, the human toll is measured not only in numbers, but in the faces and voices of those left behind. The Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management confirmed 14 deaths across Jamaica. Each a story, each a family changed forever. In the parish of Westmoreland, the shelters filled quickly. By the evening of October 29th, more than 8,400 people had taken refuge in schools, churches, and community centers, their homes either destroyed or too dangerous to return. Inside the shelter at Savannah Lamar Primary, the air was thick with exhaustion and worry. Cots lined the hallways, children clung to parents, and volunteers moved from group to group handing out bottled water and bread. David Golden, a resident of New Hope, described the moment the storm hit. The windows blew in, it was black, the wind screamed for hours. We held the door. I thought the roof would go next. For some, the decision to stay was made in minutes, shaped by fear of the unknown outside or by the hope that concrete walls would be enough. For others, evacuation came just in time. Janelle Morgan, who fled with her children hours before the eye wall arrived, remembered the rush. We left with only what we could carry. The water rose so fast. In the shelter, we just waited for news. The contrast between those who stayed and those who left is sharp, but so is the uncertainty that shaped every choice. Evacuation orders came late for parts of Westmoreland, and many residents weighed the risk of facing the storm at home against the chaos of crowded shelters. As the winds died down, the reality of loss set in. Some families discovered their houses flattened or swept away by the surge. Others searched for missing relatives, their calls echoing through the darkened streets. In the shelters, daily life became a test of patience and endurance. Power outages left entire parishes in darkness for more than 18 hours. Communications were patchy at best, with radios serving as the only connection to the outside world. Food and water arrived slowly, delayed by blocked roads and the collapse of the A2 bridge west of Mandeville. Relief workers, stretched thin, did what they could to comfort the displaced. One Red Cross volunteer, moving from cot to cot, said, "People are scared, tired, but grateful to be alive. We're trying to keep spirits up." For those who lost loved ones, the grief was immediate and raw. Prime Minister Andrew Holness addressed the nation, saying, "Our hearts are with all those who have lost homes and lives. Recovery will take all of us together." In the days that followed, the shelters became both havens and reminders of what had been lost. Children drew pictures of their homes, parents made lists of what they needed to rebuild, and neighbors shared stories of survival. The numbers, 14 dead, 8,400 sheltered, are only the beginning. The true impact of Melissa is written in the memories and resilience of those who endured its fury. Supply chains buckled within hours of Melissa's landfall. The A2 bridge, west of Mandeville, a critical artery for relief convoys, collapsed under floodwaters and debris, severing access to 3 parishes for nearly 2 days. Trucks loaded with food, water, and medicine sat idle at roadblocks, while shelter coordinators in St. Elizabeth and Manchester radioed for updates that rarely came. With the bridge out, everything downstream was isolated. One failure rippled for miles. For many, the blackout was just as crippling. Power lines crumpled beneath fallen trees and snapped poles, plunging entire districts into darkness for more than 18 hours. Cell towers battered by 180-mile-per-hour winds left communities cut off, unable to call for help or receive official updates. Emergency generators hummed in hospitals and shelters, but fuel ran low as deliveries stalled. The Jamaica Public Service Company reported that over 70% of customers in southern and western parishes lost electricity, with restoration efforts hampered by impassable roads and ongoing rain. Tourism, the lifeblood of Jamaica's southern coast, suffered a staggering blow. Preliminary estimates put sector losses at $250 million, with resorts shuttered, beaches scoured, and bookings canceled en masse. The main highway to Treasure Beach and Negril was blocked in several places, leaving stranded tourists to crowd local shelters or wait for rescue. Local business owners shared stories of ruined inventories and lost livelihoods, their voices echoing through empty, powerless streets. Inside the Savannah Lamar primary shelter, volunteer Marcia Hilton moved between cots, checking on families by flashlight. "We're doing what we can, but it's hard," she said. "No power, no phone signal, and the roads are gone. People are scared. Supplies are slow to get here. We're just trying to keep everyone calm until help arrives." Every system depended on the next: bridges, roads, power, and communication. And when one failed, the strain multiplied. For those managing relief, the gaps were not abstract. They meant hungry children, anxious parents, and long nights with only rumors for news. The first 48 hours after the storm became a test of patience and endurance, as volunteers and officials worked around the clock to restore even the most basic connections. The full extent of the infrastructure breakdown was still being tallied, but for the thousands waiting in the dark, the reality was immediate and unyielding. As of Advisory 32A, Hurricane Melissa remains a formidable presence in the western Atlantic. The storm, now a Category 3 hurricane, is positioned just north of Jamaica, holding sustained winds near 125 miles per hour. Its broad circulation continues to draw moisture from the Caribbean, feeding rain bands that stretch from the Blue Mountains to the southern coast of Cuba. Forecasters warn that rainfall totals could exceed 10 inches in the hardest hit regions, enough to trigger flash floods and landslides in already saturated terrain. Model projections from the National Hurricane Center and international meteorological agencies show Melissa tracking slowly to the north-northeast. This path places eastern Cuba, the southeastern Bahamas, and parts of the Turks and Caicos directly in the storm's sights over the coming days. The slow forward speed is a particular concern. With each hour, the risk of prolonged rainfall and secondary flooding grows. In mountainous areas of Jamaica and Cuba, the danger is not over. Hillsides, loosened by days of relentless downpour, remain at risk of collapse with little warning. Advisories emphasize that the threat is not limited to wind alone. Storm surge watches have been issued for low-lying islands in the Bahamas, where coastal inundation could reach several feet above normal tide levels. Emergency managers are urging residents to avoid all travel in flood-prone zones and to seek shelter if evacuation is advised. Power disruptions, already widespread in Jamaica, may extend to new regions as the storm's outer bands sweep across the northern Caribbean. The Jamaican Meteorological Service and the National Hurricane Center continue to issue frequent updates, urging vigilance. Shelters remain open, and relief organizations are mobilizing supplies for areas at risk of renewed isolation. In this window of uncertainty, the message from officials is clear. Heed warnings, stay informed, and prepare for conditions that can change with little notice. For those in the path of Melissa, the next 48 hours will demand patience, caution, and close attention to every official bulletin. Cabinet minutes from the morning of October 27th record a 6-hour gap between the first urgent advisory and the official evacuation order for southwestern Jamaica. Inside those hours, local leaders weighed the cost of uprooting thousands against the uncertainty of a shifting forecast. The delay forced families to decide for themselves: risk the storm at home or scramble for safety as the winds began to rise. Emergency managers now face hard questions about the timing of those orders and the systems that underpin them. Policy analysts point to a familiar pattern. When communications broke down, word of mouth and social media filled the void, but not always fast enough. Diaspora networks, Jamaicans abroad, watching the news from London, Toronto, and New York, mobilized funds almost instantly. In the first 48 hours after landfall, remittance agencies and digital platforms recorded a 35% surge in transfers, with over $14 million routed directly to families and local NGOs. For some shelters, WhatsApp messages from relatives overseas arrived before official updates, delivering both comfort and practical support. Melissa's rapid intensification was not a surprise to climate scientists tracking ocean heat content in the basin. Peer-reviewed studies had already warned that the odds of such storms are climbing. In 2025, the chance of a hurricane strengthening so quickly is estimated to be up to 900 times higher than in the pre-industrial era. Yet the tools for real-time response, early warning systems, evacuation logistics, and cross-border aid coordination have not kept pace with the science. Disaster managers and researchers now call for investment, not just in forecasting, but in the governance that turns forecasts into action. Cabinet transcripts revealed tension between local autonomy and central authority. Some officials argued for earlier, decentralized warnings. Others feared panic and disorder. The lesson, echoed in post-storm debriefs, is that clarity and speed save lives. The experience of Melissa has already prompted calls for new protocols, streamlined communication, and formal recognition of diaspora aid as a pillar of resilience. For the Caribbean, the next hurricane season will arrive soon enough. The question is whether the systems in place will be ready for what science now says is not just possible, but probable. Hurricane Melissa reached Jamaica on October 27, 2025, as a Category 5 storm with sustained winds of 185 miles per hour and a central pressure of 892 millibars, one of the most powerful Atlantic hurricanes recorded in the modern era. Official reports confirm at least 14 lives lost, over 8,400 people in shelters, and $250 million in tourism losses. Yet, the full extent of the damage remains uncounted as assessment teams continue their work. While Melissa has weakened to Category 3 and moves north of Jamaica, risks of further rainfall, landslides, and disruption persist for Cuba, the Bahamas, and beyond. Key questions persist. How will affected regions rebuild? And how will emergency systems adapt as rapid intensification becomes more likely on a warming planet? The evidence shows that storms like Melissa are increasingly probable under current climate trends. As the situation develops, all eyes remain on official advisories and the resilience of communities in the storm's path. Hurricane Melissa's story is not over, and its lessons are urgent, clear, and ongoing.